Hey everybody, welcome to the ROTL UK podcast, episode 360, Time to Grow. My name's Matthew Turner alongside Ashley Soden. How you doing, man?
Doing good, doing good. Obviously, feels weird to do this at this time of the day, but needs must and all that. And it's kind of funny. We're doing the podcast earlier than you usually do for a Monday night football game, which is later than we usually play. So I guess it kind of all balances out.
It does. It does feel weird though, I'm not gonna lie, you're absolutely right. We are going to be previewing the Ravens game, as you say, on Monday Night Football. But first, please do join our Discord channel. Great place to chat all things Lions with some really passionate fans from both sides of the pond. Link us in the live chat right now. College Football Podcast is going to be following this show pretty much straight away. So if you're in the live chat, do hang around on this channel and you'll be treated to some fabulous takes on week 3 of college football, which was an absolute barnstormer before looking ahead to week 4. Please do like this episode, sub to the podcast. You guys know what to do by now. And just as a bit of housekeeping, I realise that the ticker is malfunctioning, and I apologise on the live chat. So it's just huge, and I can't fix it. And I'm not going to turn it off. So if you think it's weird, it is. It's not just you. Right. Let's go on with some news before going into the Baltimore preview. First of all, there's been some roster moves. Ash signed to the main roster. Offensive lineman Tristan Colon from the practice squad. He had a good preseason. Some surprise. 1, that he didn't go on IR. 2, that he didn't make it to the 53. 3, that he made it through to the practice squad. And now here he is again back on the 53. We've signed 2 players to the practice squad. One is the wide receiver cornerback Malik Cunningham, who had some fans in Detroit coming out of the draft as a low-end draft pick, as well as the tight end Ross Swelley. We've placed on injured reserve the tight end Shane Zylstra. We have waived from the practice squad the linebacker Monty Rice. He did not exactly last a long time here, but, he made an impression with an unnecessary roughness call, at least. And then some awards, and very well deserved. The NFC Offensive Player of the Week is Jared Goff, and the FedEx Air and Ground Player of the Week is Amon-Ra St. Brown for their excellent performances against the Chicago Bears. Ross Dwelly, thank you for that. Sorry, apologies. Some moves and some awards.
Yeah, let's start with the last one with the wave and practice squad. It was pretty much said by the roster by Dan and Fifth that the reason we waived Pittman and signed Rice to the practice squad is because of the special teams. And then he got that necessary roughness. As soon as that happened, obviously I wasn't on the stream, but I said to myself, right, that's him gone. That's his chance done. And lo and behold, that's happened. The signing of Ross Dwelly, who people might remember as the tight end that San Francisco re-signed after they failed to get Brock Rice with the whole tender situation. So kind of comes home to roost a bit, kind of like the Clelin Ferrell signing for the Chargers recently. Kind of fun. Malik Cunningham, Dan has quickly spoke about in his press conference just that he is right now practicing as a wide receiver, but they are planning to use him as a kind of scout team quarterback situation for the defense to practice their containment against running QBs like Cunningham and Lamar Jackson, who obviously they know each other very well. There's the crossover in college where Lamar's last year, Cunningham's first year at Louisville, played in the same kind of systems. And then, Cunningham's been in Baltimore up until last month pretty much. So hopefully we'll get a bit of an insider scoop from him. Obviously, the Dwelly signing is to replace Silstra, who got injured on one of the kickoffs, season ending as well, which is unfortunate for him, though. Obviously, as a bit of a meme, that means my predictions finally come true. We're finally free of the zeitgeist that is James Silstra on this roster. And then Colon, as you mentioned, was looking impressive in camp, and that up until the Falcons game we got injured, he was the forerunner for that backup centre job. So God knows what this means in terms of prognosis for interior offensive line. I know Dan said today in his presser that Mahogany should be good to go. Maybe this was just a preemptive signing just in case he wasn't. But he also, Colon does offer that kind of versatility where he can back up both guard spots and the centre spot to a reasonable standard. So it might just be we felt we needed to show up the interior, especially, coming up against a pretty formidable Ravens defensive line. So makes sense, I guess. And then for the awards, well done to both. Goff definitely deserves it, though obviously the funny stat that both NFC Offensive Player of the Weeks so far this season have come against for the QB going up against the Chicago Bears. So that's kind of funny. And then Amon-Ra winning air and ground, very well deserved, and hopefully they can continue on against a pretty good Ravens defense now.
And obviously, the awards relate to the Bears game, as you say. One of the other things which I didn't put in there, but I just want to mention because I've always been a fan of his, and you've mentioned him just now. Brock Wright scored his 10th touchdown for the Detroit Lions, which is the most of any UDFA tight end in franchise history, which I thought was a really cool little stat. So he's making his own piece of history as an unheralded guy with athletic upside and really kind of, showing everyone what he can do. He's consistently grading out very well now as well, which I also really like. He's one of those players who's never going to get paid very much, so I wonder if he might be a career Lion. Just because why is there any need to move on from him? He's like a really good, mid-level tight end too. Why move on? Ever, really.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is when the rivalries uniforms come out next year, you're getting Brock Rice on the back of yours.
I will consider it.
Tesla on the back of mine.
Yeah, that'd be so cool. Right, let's get into the Ravens preview. They are 1-1. Their expected wins is 1.4. They started off with a loss on Sunday Night Football at Buffalo, 41-40. After being 15 points ahead with about 8 minutes to play, they really did kind of blow that one. Although, some heroics from the Buffalo Bills and some villains on the Ravens side, and then they backed it up with a win against the Cleveland Browns, who they struggled actually to put away for a long time. Cleveland's defense really kept them in that game, and Flacco's faults didn't really show up big time until the second half, where he kind of imploded. Looking at this game, Bet365 have the odds as the Lions at 39-20. That's about plus 195, and then Baltimore are 12-5 on. That's minus 240, so the implied odds basically say that they're expecting the Ravens to win 2 in every 3 times here. Detroit, therefore, on the spread, are getting 4.5 points, and the over-under is 53. There's obviously no injury reports out yet because we're this far away from the game. We don't have to have one until today, and that will be later on tonight, I believe, with the third injury report. Instead of being on Friday as normal, it will be on Saturday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So by the time you're listening to this, if you're on the audio pod, you may well have the first couple of days worth. But we have heard from Dan, Sione Vaki is likely to return this week, and Marcus Davenport is still getting tested, even though it's been 4 days since the last game and they were seeking a second opinion. So, Ash, we'll just stop there. Actually, no, sorry, I'll go through injuries for Baltimore. We know what their IR is like, or their reserve list. So on the PUP, the safety Darius Washington, who I remember was a fan of both of us. We were a fan of his, both of us, in the draft process as an undersized safety. I think he's 5'9", and he was, I think, 100 or 99 on the consensus board, and ended up going undrafted because of his height, and he came in as just being an absolute wonder. Of course, his going out has meant that Malachi Starks, the first-round pick, has had an unabated route to the starting lineup. So there's that. Then on the NFI list is the third-round pick guard Emory Jones from LSU. And then at injured reserve, the cornerback Billy Alcone, who is a sixth-round pick out of Western Michigan. And the cornerback Robert Longerbeam, who is the sixth-round pick this year from Rutgers. So let's stop there. Ravens generally have had an extremely competitive game against Buffalo where they really should have won. Eventually blew away Cleveland. It's at home on Monday night. The betting odds very much favour them. They've got some injuries that they would like to not have, but they are not missing anyone yet who is really, really key for them at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously the Coney injury, Jesus, I remember watching that in pre-season. That was horrific. But yeah, the biggest miss for them probably is Darius Washington. Like the others are rookies who would have been depth roles. Like Coney probably would have been the sort of like cornerback 5, probably kind of backing up their first round pick from last year, who absolutely balled out as much as I didn't want him to because I didn't like him in that draft cycle. And then Longbeam would have probably been like the Marlon Humphrey backups of so cornerback 6. They're not really hurting, unlike other teams in their division. Looking at you, Bengals, who we'll be getting onto in a couple of weeks, they're just a really good roster, aren't they? Like you look at them top to bottom, and I know we'll go into it in a bit, but the fact that they're in that same situation as we are, where the only ones that really make an impact are the top 2 picks. Everyone else is either depth pieces on the practice squad or on IR. They're just a really good team, aren't they?
They are. There are 2 injuries which we're waiting to hear about. So Kyle Van Noy might miss multiple games per Jeremy Fowler, but he's not been on the injury report this week yet because there isn't one. So we don't know. The team are hoping that the injury is short term. Head coach John Harbaugh said of this and one other injury that there's nothing season ending or long term, but some of them might be week to week. So that's as much as we're going to hear about that. So Van Noy departed halfway through the second quarter in the Browns game. The other one who left during the game is Marlon Humphrey, the corner, who obviously was an elite cornerback a few years ago, has regressed somewhat, but is still a very good player. So those are 2 more key pieces, Ash. One on IR or any sort of reserve, and we'll find out more about them as the week progresses. But those would be big misses if they both can't go.
Yeah, definitely. I'm particularly looking at Marlon Humphrey because obviously, as you say, he's obviously not hitting the heights he was a couple of years ago, where you'd argue he's probably the best slot corner in the league and all that. It does mean that if he can't go, you're probably either doing a bit more of a matchup with Cole Hamilton, because he has done that before, where he's played nickel for them in certain packages, or you're bringing in TJ Tampa, their 4th round pick from last year, who was a favourite of this podcast, big, lengthy, athletic corner, or you're bringing in Jair Alexander, who's injury prone himself, or you're bringing in Chidobe Awuzie, who again was a favourite of people in free agency to maybe bring in as a backup outside corner. Like they've got depth there, but the step down from Humphrey to them is marginally is like big enough that you can maybe start playing matchups. It means that while Wiggins will cover JMO because it's speed for speed, that's the matchup they're going to be targeting. If Humphrey can't go, there's a few more little matchups we can play with Amon Ra, with Tesla, potentially with Khalif, where we could expose the Raven secondary, which going into the season, according to a load of places, including Check the Mike podcast, had the Raven secondary as the best position group in the league. So the fact that there might be a weak link there, that's something that we can definitely take advantage of, especially, when their rookie 1st round pick is saying that Jared Goff is elite. Well, you'd hope he'd be able to pick on a weak link if he's elite.
Some other people, I say peripheral, but that's not really fair. Patrick Ricard has not played yet this season. His recovery from injury has been slow. Also, I think Rasheen Ali he's in the concussion protocol, but it is suspected that he will go. I think we'll see. There's a bit of confusion as to whether he will be in or not. Who I think actually did very, very well as a kick returner, so he got some real speed, and we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, let's go through the rest of the depth chart and see what we think of it. So, quarterback is Lamar Jackson, backed up by Cooper Rush, and they have the Pro Bowl quarterback on the practice squad as well in Tyler Huntley, of course. Yep. Running backs Derrick Henry, who is still an absolute beast, although, as we're seeing, can be boom and bust sometimes. Justice Hill's the number 2. Rasheen Ali, as I've mentioned, is 3. And Keaton Mitchell is number 4. Patrick Ricard at fullback. Wide receivers, Devontae or Tez Walker, Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers, backed up by DeAndre Hopkins, Tylan Wallace and LaJohntay Wester. Tight ends, Mark Andrews, backed up by Charlie Kohler. Isaiah Likely is injured, and that actually is a bigger miss that I haven't mentioned yet, so apologies for that. Offensive linemen, Ronnie Stanley, Andrew Voorhees, Tyler Linderbaum, Daniel Falele, and Roger Rosengarten, backed up by Carson Vincent, Ben Cleveland, Corey Bullock, and Joe Noteboom. On defense, they play a base 3-4, 4. 3 down linemen of Broderick Washington Jr., Travis Jones, and Namadi Madubuike. They're backed up by John Jenkins and Aeneas Peebles. The outside linebackers, the rush ends and the Sam linebackers are Tavarius Robinson and Carl Van Noy, of course, now we know is injured and potentially not going to go. They're backed up by Adafe Owe, David Ajabo, and Mike Green. So 1 first rounder and 2 second rounders in the last 5 years. They're backups in those positions. Yikes. And then the inside linebackers, Roquan Smith leads the way with Teddy Buchanan. And then the backups are Trenton Simpson, Jake Hummel, and Jay Higgins IV. Nickelback would be Marlon Humphreys, but if he can't go, it will be Keon Martin. Outside corners are Nate Wiggins and Chidobe Awuzie. They are backed up by Jair Alexander and TJ Tampa. Alexander didn't play last week. It is expected he will be able to play this week, so maybe he'll be starting over Awuzie. We will see. Safeties are Carl Hamilton and Malachi Starks, backed up by Ruben Lowry III and Sanusi Kane. And then the specialists. Punter is Jordan Stout, who had a very good game against the Browns. Kicker was Tyler Loop, and this long snapper, Nick Moore. You see the punt returners as Rajonte Wester and Tynan Wallace, and kick returners as Tynan Wallace, Justin Hill. Rasheen Ali is the one I mentioned because he looks very good when he's doing it, but will he play? Who knows? Ash, this is an extremely strong roster all the way through. Just reading out the names, I mean, I think maybe their weakest part of their team, it's hard to pick out. Wide receiver they've invested a lot in. It still might be that, but man, it looks a lot better when D-Hop is on there, just making circus catch after circus catch in relief. And then maybe it could be offensive line quietly. Their depth is good, but it remains a question as to how good some significant portion of that line is. But you're really picking at threads here, because overall, you said about the secondary being one of the strongest units in the league. That defense was the thing that held them back last year for the first 10 weeks or so until they flipped the switch on. And then suddenly it was one of the best units in the NFL the final 7 weeks of the year, and they've kind of started as they mean to go on. I know they conceded 41 against the Bills, but somehow the defense kind of looked good doing it. Like, it's a fearsome unit all the way through, and then on offense, Lamar's Lamar, and God, that's hard enough without having Derrick Henry back there.
Yeah, so for me, the weakest bit is those offensive tackles, as you kind of mentioned. So Ronnie Stanley, I know he's a first rounder now, but he has seemingly started, Father Time has caught up with him. He's played so far this season, hasn't lived up to the reputation he's had in the past. And then at right tackle, Roger Rosengarten, who I know is a second round pick last year out of Washington. They weren't exactly the highest on him. Well, some people weren't exactly the highest on him when he came out. And the fact they've got a veteran backing him up in Joseph Noteboom, it might be something to watch. They have been an issue, though. I think currently, I know it's 2-game sample size, so very, very bad maths to base a whole spread to extrapolate it for a whole season. They're on pace to give up 47.5 sacks, which sounds a lot when you've got Lamar Jackson back there who can extend players like nobody's business. And with the way that he plays in their structure now that they've brought in, like, I actually, going back, I remember the coming out game for this new offensive scheme they have with their offense coordinator was against us a couple of years ago. So that's great. Thanks for that. But it is an issue, and it's hopefully something we can prey upon. I know, obviously, the injury to Marcus Davenport might be a slight issue there, but AQ's looked good, as we'll probably come on to in a bit. We might be able to get some pressure on Jackson. The receiver room, though, like, I'm a big fan of Zay Flowers. I was when he came out, and again, ACC bias and all that, but finally, Lamar has a reliable pass catcher he can trust, because I know obviously they threw a lot at it with drafting Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota in the first round 2021. He had some flashes. Hollywood Brown, when they drafted him, Marquise, he's finally got that person he can fully trust, and you've seen it because he's evolved from that kind of run first QB who, would force feed his tight ends and then look to other receivers. Now he's got Zay Flowers over the middle. His passing game's really flourished back to how it was at Louisville. And you still got Rashad Bateman on the outside that can do stuff. Devontae Walker, who I know we discussed just before we came on there. Yeah, he's only got 3 catches in the NFL, I think. All have gone for touchdowns. And this is the guy who people might remember from the college show a couple of years ago was the guy who transferred from Kent State to UNC. There was a whole thing about the transfer rules. He had to miss the first couple of weeks of the season. And then he was then allowed to play and absolutely tore it up. And they took him in the 4th round last year. He's finally come to it. And then they're backed up by DeAndre Hopkins, who, isn't the nuke that we remember from his days with the Cardinals and the Texans, but he's still a reliable guy and can do that sort of contested catch stuff that they want him to. LeVronte Wester, who they got out of Colorado, you can see how he's performing mostly as a punt returner, but he's a good sort of speed option in the slot as well. And Tylan Wallace, they've got receivers. And that's the good thing is for them is that they're able to then sort of still win games even when teams shut down the run game like the Browns did last week. They just focused on let's just stop the run game, force Lamar to beat us through the air. And he managed to do it even without Isaiah Loke, who's a breakout tight end for them, because for some reason their second tight end's always the best of them. Like I remember when Mark Andrews was drafted. It's also the draft where they drafted Hayden Hurst above Andrews and Lamar, and now Hurst is wherever he is in the league. They know what they're doing on offense, and it's going to work, and it's going to be scary to have to try and get pressure on Lamar, keep him contained, but also don't give him too much time to start picking through the coverage. It's going to be a real struggle for us, and that's why we've brought in Malik Cunningham to at least practice the squeeze pressure style that we're going to have. And then on defense, it's damn good, and the good news for us is the scheme they play, so they're still under the Wink Martindale kind of scheme where it's a lot of blitzes. That's where Jared is best. If he's kept clean and he can see the blitz coming, he's one of the best in the league at doing something that I always say on the streams when we see a blitz. He's very good at replacing man with ball. He sees where the blitz is coming and he fires the ball in on time. He stands there and takes the hit if he needs to. He makes sure to throw to an open receiver. So long as he doesn't get panics against the blitzes, we should be okay. And obviously, Carl Van Noy, who sneakily has been a really good edge rusher for them, him missing is going to be a big thing because then suddenly you're looking at Mike Green, who I know a lot of people liked in this draft class. He fell to the second round for a reason, though. You've got Daffy Owe, who they drafted a couple of years ago in the first, who's good. And then David Jarbo, who, let's be frank, as much as NFL UK likes to pump him up, has been a bust. It is less scary without Van Noy there sort of propping things up. But that front three is still damn good. Like, we know how much I liked Madubuike, Travis Jones, who was also a favourite ant a couple of years ago at UConn. And then my sweet undersized prince of this draft class and his Peebles, him rotating in as well. They're going to get some pressure up on Goff fronts, but it's about, can he stand there, deliver the ball on time against these corners? Because, if Humphrey doesn't go, because I know he's listed as a nickel back, but when they're in the kind of base formation, it's a Humphrey and Wiggins on the outside. And when they go to nickel, Humphrey then slides inside and then an outside corner comes off the bench to take that role. Can we pick apart that secondary against the blitzes? Because otherwise, they're just going to tee off on us. They're going to get us into short, third and longs and just tee off with their blitzes, which they're so good at. So that's the main thing is get pressure on Lamar, make sure he doesn't get the pocket, but didn't give him too much time. And then just for Goff just to stay calm under the pressure and deliver the ball into the blitzes, because otherwise this could be a long night for us, because obviously Monday Night Football, I'm going to be up at like 3 a.m. watching it, so let's hope it's not too bad.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to watch it, I don't think. I'm not sure if I can find a way to actually see it while I'm in Montenegro, but anyway. Still to come, we're going to talk about what their off-season moves were in terms of their draft picks and in free agency, and then we're going to translate what we've seen from their tape against Buffalo and Cleveland into how we think the matchups are going to go on both sides of the ball in run and pass. So, off-season moves, their draft picks. We've already mentioned most of these guys, well, all of these guys already, but just to highlight exactly where they went. Malachi Starks taken at 27 overall, the safety out of Georgia. Mike Green, defensive end, could start for pick number 59 in the second round from Marshall. Emory Jones, the offensive lineman, at 91 overall in the third round from LSU. He's on IR. Teddy Buchanan, linebacker starter, at 129 in the fourth round from Cal. I loved him in the draft. I think that was a steal. Number 141 of the fifth round tackle, Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M. I know we featured him fairly heavily. I wasn't a fan of his. I have to say I'm not sure that's going to work, but we'll see. We mentioned Billy Alcone, from Western Michigan. He's on IR. He was picked at 178 in the 6th round. Starting kicker is Tyler Loop. They needed to get someone after they let he who shall not be named. He's not Watson, but he's not far away. Tyler Loop, he has come in to replace that person from Arizona at 186 in the 6th round, and he's been very good so far. Not like most rookie kickers who seem to struggle. I think he's hit the ground running, so to speak. Also, 3 more picks in the 6th round. They have 5 6th-round picks, and I think they made good picks, actually, in this round. LaJohntay Wester from Colorado at 203 in the 6th round is their primary punt returner, and he does get some reps as a wide receiver too. As a wide receiver as well, not as a wide receiver too. Aeneas Peebles, you've mentioned, the defensive tackle from Virginia Tech, who you really liked. 6th round, 210. 2 picks later, the defensive back Robert Longerbeam from Rutgers on IR. And then Garrett Dellinger, the guard from LSU, who in the consensus board was in the top 120, fell all the way down to 243, almost Mr. Irrelevant in the 7th round. He was cut, and he is now at the Cleveland Browns. In free agency, they brought in DeAndre Hopkins, 1 year, $5 million. Jair Alexander, 1 year, $4 million. Quarterback 2, Cooper Rush, 2 years, $6.2. Tackle Joe Noteboom, 1 year, 2. And cornerback Chidobe Awuzie, 1 year, $1.25. And then out went interior offensive lineman Patrick McCarry, 3 years, $37.5. Cornerback Brandon Stevens, 3 years, $36. Linebacker Malik Harrison, 2 years, $10. And then still out there is the safety Marcus Williams and wide receiver Nelson Aguilar. Just thinking about their moves in the offseason, Ash, what do you think? They've not lost a lot, and they have gained significant amounts, and I think they've taken low-risk swings at veteran backups and contributors. And I think when you look at Alexander and Hopkins, it's low risk, potentially high reward, because they may not see the field at all, but if they do, the pedigree's there.
Exactly, yeah. So as we mentioned, like Nuke's there to be the sort of that. If I say that Isaac Tesla, I hope people understand as in he's going to be the sort of go ball, jump ball kind of situation, and we'll see it hopefully as Tesla's role evolves even more with him getting more reps. That kind of third and long kind of guy where, yeah, if Lamar needs to force a ball into coverage, he can go up and get it, and that's the thing. The thing is, though, Nuke will actually use both hands. Like Scotty Montgomery made the joke in his presser, just that he doesn't know if Tesla has good hands because he's only seen him use his right hand, which was a tiny bit sus for you, Scotty. I'd expected your mind to be out the gutter, mate. But yeah, that's a good addition for them because I mentioned at the top, Lamar has struggled in the past in those kind of situations to have a reliable guy you can trust. It was supposed to be Bateman, but that hasn't worked out. They've brought in Nuke to be that. They had some issues on the back end last year in terms of injury, especially with Marlon Humphrey. I believe he was injured for a bit of a stretch last year and it hurt them. So they bring in Alexander, who, yes, has got injury problems of his own, kind of like us bringing in Davenport. But the fact that he's a backup and he doesn't have to start and they can play him if there is an injury, at least to fill in for the rest of the game. It's a low risk, high upside thing because when Jair is on, he is one of the best corners in the league, unfortunately. Plus, it's him bringing him back with his best friend because he was at Louisville with Lamar Jackson. So being really nice with best friend, hopefully they can get the best out of him. Cooper Rush, while he's not exactly the most mobile guy, he can come in and do the passing concepts that they want, and they can just adjust the blocking scheme to maybe, for him to have like a Goff-like kind of mobility in the pocket where he can step up and deliver a ball, but he's not going to do a Lamar and run 40 yards to get a ball off or to get a first down if he's under pressure. Noteboom's a good veteran tackle, obviously. Famously, I think he had a good year with the Rams when they won the Super Bowl, signed a big contract, kind of fell off since then, but as a veteran backup in case you need him, good. Rouzier is good as well. And then in the draft as well, they just let good players fall to them. Malachi Starks, good player. Mike Green, let's put the personal issues aside, good player. Teddy Buchanan, good player. Tyler Loop is a good kicker. Aeneas Peebles as well. I loved him as a kind of third down pass rusher that you can build on. Good. LaJohntay Wester, went a bit under the radar with Colorado. All those receivers really did, and they all fell to this kind of range. But productive in college, can do the punt returns. They just did Ravens things. Then that's what they've been doing for ever since they've come into existence. Really, they've been this kind of team that's been pretty much consistently good, brings in good players, has good process, and it bears fruits. And we're getting to that stage as well now. Touch wood, but in terms of their off season, well, they couldn't have done much better, really.
Yeah, given where they were drafting and the fact they didn't do a huge amount of moving about until day 3, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, with Starks, he wasn't going to start, but man, like not calling him a starter day 1 is not being genuine. Really, the fact that he's starting, most teams would be starting him in the NFL. Just goes to show how good the team is that he might have not been starting over our Darius Washington. Mike Green might be a starter for this game. You know, one of the final picks in the second round. Teddy Buchanan, as you mentioned, is a starter. You know, late 4th round pick. Tyler Loop, Wester being the punt returner. Like, they're just finding contributors all across the draft. And then I love what they did in free agency. You mentioned Joe Noteboom being this veteran guy to back up Rosengarten, but they got him for $2 million a year. And I mean, he's maybe worth $2 million a year, but he's a passable veteran backup. That's very, very cheap. So I love what they did. And then Chidobe Awuzie might be the best one of the lot in terms of what's the word I'm trying to look for? Dollars per, no, what is it? Pound for pound. Pound for pound might be one of the best free agency acquisitions of the lot in the league, because I think he's low-key a starting caliber NFL cornerback, and they're getting him for $1.25 million a year. It's just over veteran minimum. That's absolutely unbelievable. So, yeah, I'm very high on what they've done. But they are 1-1 because of what happened against the Bills, where they crumbled late. Let's talk about this matchup, and maybe we can reference the 2 games that they've played so far. So for the Lions on running offense against their run defense, obviously we're coming in having had a much better day against the Bears than we did in week 1 against Green Bay. But if you have a look at the defensive units, I know that Baltimore run a primarily 3-4 look as compared to the Green Bay 4-3 look and the Bears 4-3 look. But if you have a look at the style of how they attack you, I feel like the Ravens are very much more akin to Green Bay than anyone else. You know, that it's not going to be like the Bears. We had an uptick. Our communication was better, but we're going to be away from home again. Has the communication improved when you can't hear each other? It's going to be a big question. And you have a look at this rush defense that they have in terms of not just their style of play and how they rush you, but who. Travis Jones has come into the league and he didn't see one of the best noses in the NFL. Madubuike wasn't going to get paid, but forced the Ravens to, because he just played out of his skin after getting the tag, first of all, I think, for a ridiculous amount of money. Broderick Washington, I can take or leave, but they've got Peebles, as you mentioned, who can rotate in there. And then, you know, those guys as outside linebackers and how the inside linebackers are in run fits. They get after you, they put you under a huge amount of pressure, and they're very, very stout up front. So this is going to be, as far as it gets, one of the bigger challenges we face this season for our rushing offense.
Yeah, definitely. So as people in Discord know, I do subscribe to a lot of like the stat stuff. So first coming into this game, admittedly, yes, probably propped up a lot by Sunday, but our rushing offense is 5th in success rate with 48%, and the Baltimore defense is 16th, so bank average actually for success rate 43.5%. But then you look at the EPA per rush, and they're pretty similar. So in terms of rankings, at least for our offense, we're 26 with minus 0.1 EPA per rush. Their 0.11 EPA per rush was 27th. So on paper, in terms of looking at the personnel, it seems like it's going to be a tough matchup. But then you look at the stats, at least so far they performed, and it tells a slightly different story in terms of that actually we might be able to get a bit more joy than we expect. Though obviously it probably is weighted by the fact that, you know, week 1 they came up against Josh Allen and he had a monster, like, inhuman game. So that will probably affect their numbers a bit. But I can see them having some joy. It's going to be more of a Gibbs game than it is going to be a Monty game. After last week, I was saying that I'm pushing for Monty to get most of the stuff, and because he's fired up and both had reasonable days. This is 100% going to be a Gibbs game. Number one, because he was the bright spark against them a couple of years ago. He was like the one good thing we had on offense, pretty much, was his coming out party against their defense. But also because of the way they play with their blitz schemes and how they like to get their pressure through the middle. It is going to be one of them where him on the outside zones and the counters and that, where we basically use their blitzes against him to get him free against their secondary. It's going to be one of them games. We're not going to, rush for 200 yards. Like, it's not going to be like that, but we can get some joy, I think, with the zone stuff. But anything with gap, unless it's perfectly blocked and executed, it's going to be a bit harder to do the gap. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where the game script and how the points are early on might dictate this game. One of the things that the Bills did really well is they were down by 2 scores multiple times in this game, and they never went away from the rushing attack, and they only went at 3.5 yards a carry. They struggled. You mentioned Josh Allen. He was 14 carries for 30 yards. Holy hell, no one's done that to Josh Allen in a long time when it comes to rushing the ball. James Cook got a huge amount of money in the offseason, 13 carries, 44 yards. Like, this rushing attack really struggled against the Baltimore rush defense. But what they did is they stuck with it, and what yards they did get came late when they ground them down and when it mattered most. The Bills roared back in this game because the dam kind of burst late on, but that was because the hard graft was put in. One of the things the Browns did, to their credit, when they kind of refused to go away for maybe 2.5 quarters, is they stuck with their rushing game. They went at 5.5 yards a carry. 31 of those yards actually came from one Quinton Junkins run. The rest wasn't so great. But again, to their credit, they kind of stuck with it with 22 carries. So, it's one of those where no matter how bad it gets, you've kind of got to stick with it, even if you get behind multiple scores, because it will eventually pay dividends against this rush defense. They're so attacking and they're so aggressive that it's like a boxer that is just going to come out swinging, and if you can just survive by round 12, you might be able to nudge them over and win. And I do feel like this is a team that you can out-stamina a bit. It's like playing Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp. They're going to go heavy metal, they're going to throw everything at it, and in the last 10-15 minutes, that's when you're going to find your joy.
Yeah, so I'm trying. It's the one that you obviously that came for you. For me, it was the Muhammad Ali. I think it was the Rumble in the Jungle, where his whole game plan was just outlast him. That's why he was licking stuff. Rope it up, exactly. That's how we're going to do it. And then I've just gone down on my stats, and actually, gap might be at least early, definitely zone. But as you say, later on, because that's what we do. It didn't work against the Packers, but it definitely worked last week against the Bears. That's why we stick with Monty. We keep doing it because eventually, the defense will tire out and then you can start getting them. Looking at it again, this is in isolation. The Baltimore face zone actually the least one at least in terms of run concepts. They're 28th in terms of zone faced, but they're middle of the pack in EPA. Giving up with gap, they face it a lot more, but they're the 5th best in EPA. So it is sort of, as you say, wearing them down, because that's how the Bills won last week, 2 weeks ago. The Browns kept in it, just wear them down and then lighten them and use, as we'll get into in a bit, use the pass to lighten up. Basically what we did against the Bears, use play action to open up the run and then vice versa. Just play that rope it up with them. Yeah,
so let's talk then about the Lions' passing offense against this Ravens passing defense. We spoke about how good this secondary is. And I mean, if you just talk about that back 7, you've got Roquan Smith, who I think is the best linebacker in the NFL. I know Fred Warner's going to have something to say about it, but he's in the conversation. Teddy Buchanan has a shout to be maybe, I'm not going to say he's going to be Defensive Player, a Rookie of the Year, but I do think that is maybe one of the best value for money draft picks in the NFL this year. And then you have a look at those DBs. Nate Wiggins, as much as you like to try and wind up Ravens fans out there, really has turned it on, actually, to start the season. But also at the end of last year, he was very, very good. If Jair plays, they've got Chidobe Awuzie, and then Starks and Hamilton, this is going to be a test for Goff. Now, Goff is a sort of quarterback that this Ravens team is not going to like playing against because they feast on people who make bad decisions under pressure. Goff has shown to not be that guy much anymore. And they feast on people who aren't that accurate. Well, Goff, again, is not exactly that sort of player. But the key will be, as you've kind of highlighted just a moment ago, that we've got to be able to get the play-action pass game going. If this becomes a drop-back passing game for the Lions, I think we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, definitely. So again, looking at the sort of stats, the Ravens are really good at defending the pass. So they're ninth currently in EPA per dropback given up, mostly because obviously they do get the turnovers. But we're also third in EPA per drop created with 0.35. It is going to be one of them where Goff's just going to have to take the blitzes. So they do blitz quite a lot. They're actually third in blitz EPA. We're first in the face. There's a load of these where you just look and it's either like strength on strength, weakness on weakness. Their big thing is if they don't blitz us, if they do sort of only rush the 4 traditionally, they're 13th in EPA given up with 0.08 per down. We're 4th in 0.12. So it's can Goff and guys go on the offensive line recognize when the blitz is coming, when it's not, get themselves into the right play. Because if we can have the right plays in place and that communication is there, will be such a good place. So it is about, can Glasgow and Goff have that thing? Because that's what really hurts against the Packers, watching it backwards, because we're under center. It's a silent count. Glasgow's basically got his head between his legs trying to see where Goff's giving him the signal. Goff's got to almost turn into the center at that point, recognize the blitz, because that's how they got us. Was Glasgow put his head down to do the snap, look for the signal, and the Packers would move. And that's what got us. It's about, can we pick up on that, get into the right play, and can we use motion against them? Because they're not that great. They're middle of the pack against motion as well. When we're one of the best when we do use motion, which we did a lot more against the Bears again. It's just, can we build on what we did against the Bears last week in terms of getting into the right place, communication being there, using play action, using motion, and just weather the storm, because there are going to be times when the Ravens will just send all hell at us, and Goff will have to. I'm not expecting the offensive line performance last week where Goff's going to be virtually clean. He's going to take quite a few hits this week. It's, can he weather them? Can the offensive line weather them? And can he deliver the ball on time to the right players? Because, if we start letting the Ravens dictate our plays to us, it's going to be like the Packers all over again.
Yeah, I think that they're going to have watched the Packers game and are going to aim to emulate what happened there. You know, they're both away from home. Have the communication issues been fixed is going to be really key. But even if they haven't, you're going to be looking at an inexperienced interior offensive line and our 2 guards. Whether you consider Mahogany a rookie or not, and by experience he probably is. And then you have a look at who we have on the other side in Tate Ratledge. The Ravens love to bring simulated pressures. They like to show blitz a lot and bail out of it, or bring everyone, or do a mix of some and some of the other. They like to show blitz on one side and then bring it from the other. It's one of those that's going to take a lot for Goff to figure out. It's going to rely a lot on Graham Glasgow calling out correct protection, saying what he's seeing. And then, you know what? The instincts are just going to have to take over for Ratledge and Mahogany, and we're going to have to hope that it bloody works. It's going to be a big test, but with no Carl Van Noy, maybe that will be easier. He's not ruled out yet, by the way, but it just seems like he's not going to be a go. Let's move on to the other side of the ball for the Lions on defense. First, against the run. And it has been a heck of a start for Derrick Henry. He went for, over 140 yards in game 1, but only 2 yards a carry in game 2, going 23 yards on 11 carries. He has fumbled the ball twice, once in each game, I believe. And behind him, you haven't seen a huge amount from people like Justice Hill or anyone else like that. Lamar Jackson was held to only 2 carries for 13 yards against the Browns. To be fair, he didn't have to do a lot of rushing in order to win that game. He was put under a lot of pressure, though. But, against the Bills, Lamar went 6 for 70 and a touchdown. Henry, was 18 for 169 and 2 touchdowns in that game. So, they have it very much within them to completely take over if they're not stout. And yet this Lions rush defense has continued to show up. They gave a little bit up against the Chicago Bears, but, they made their presence felt when then Swift had that fumble. Will Branch be able to do the same thing once again? It's going to be an interesting battle here because when we had a look at the Lions on offense, it feels like it's going to be a really interesting matchup that could be very balanced, could go one way or the other. This one, it seems like it could be boom or bust. It feels like this might be the key matchup because I don't see it kind of being a wash where it's just okay. I think either the Lions really get a handle on what happens and they could completely shut them down on this side of the ball, and I would back them to do that. But it could be a way that the Ravens totally blow the Lions away.
Yeah, definitely. And again, stats back that up. So Baltimore are 8th in EPA per rush, but 13th in success rate. So they're 0.07 EPA per rush, 45.2% success rate. The Lions are 5th in EPA per rush given up in minus 0.22. So that's close. But 4th in success rate, we only give up successful runs on 39.1% of the ones we face, which kind of bore fruits in both games. Like I know obviously Swift last week had that massive rush on the 1st and 15, but other than that, we pretty much had him and Caleb battled up. You go back to week 1 against the Packers, and for the first 3 quarters, we were getting them into 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 quite a lot. We were successful against the run. It was just then the coverage didn't hold up. So yeah, it is going to be about can the front seven, shall we say, including Barnes if he's on the field, but then Branch as that kind of enforcer, overhang, strong safety. Can they just be disciplined in their run fits? Because we know Terrian and DJ Reed on the outside are going to be good in run defense. If they do outside zones those, they will be able to handle it for the most part. Hoping we don't have another stiff arm happen with Henry. It's about can that front seven just be disciplined, stay in their rush lanes, and don't let the explosives happen, because that's the big thing. If they start getting those explosive runs, it'll set up stuff for them in the passing game as well, because suddenly Kirby and he'll have to start thinking like run defense, and then suddenly you'll have Ted Walker going on a deep post and it'll be screwed. It is about can we bottle up Henry and Lamar on those early downs, force them into obvious pressing situations on 3rd downs, and then we can tee off with the pass rush.
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle, I think, always against Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. Now, the zone read is always going to be an issue for the Lions. I just don't see that getting fixed. Lamar has shown that he's willing to do it, but maybe less so than in previous years, because as his arms improved, he has to rely less on his legs. He's much more of a scrambler than a designed runner for what he used to be. Although he did show against the Bills, again, he was willing to have a few designed runs in the bag. But again, it's not anything like it was in his first couple of years in the league. Henry, they do kind of run into the ground a little bit, but man, he can take the load. But it might just be in his head that there's a fumble in him. So, can you get him worried about it? Or can you force one and really kind of bottle him up? Because I do think he coughed one up early against the Browns. And I think that affected his confidence throughout the rest of the game. So, can you force negative plays? Because I do think that it is a confidence unit, this Ravens rushing offense. Moving over to the passing offense for the Ravens. We said about their wide receivers, you're a big Zay Flowers fan. He's been absolutely fantastic. Bateman did get a second deal, even though he was pretty awful the first couple of years. He has rebounded into let's call him a lower mid-tier wide receiver too, because I think that's all I can say about him really, but enough to get paid. And then Tez Walker and DeAndre Hopkins being the other two guys just do contribute very, very well. Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews. He may drop one in the end zone once or twice. Sorry to the UK Ravens who are in the chat. But he obviously is still one of the better tight ends in the league. And they're going to go up against the Lions unit who we have really high hopes for. It's a unit that has not performed maybe as it could or should do, especially against the Packers. But Terry and Arnold and DJ Reed did get better, especially into the Bears game. They made some impactful plays. Kirby Joseph had an awful week 1, rebounded really hard in week 2, actually had a very good game. Brian Branch is just doing Brian Branch things. He is if no one goes above 14 sacks this year, he would be an interesting shout to maybe be the interception leader or No, have a good combination of like interceptions and sacks to the point where he's like a dark horse to be defensive player of the year. Um,
Yeah.
Amik is just fantastic, and then Jack Campbell we now know hasn't practiced today. Anzalone's continued to play really well, but Derek Barnes has actually been a real disappointment back there. I think so far, not really making impactful plays, missing in run fits. So that's my weak link. I think is maybe Derek Barnes right now. All the rest of the guys have had good play in part. I think this is a really well matched up lineup. The really key thing here is, though, is that Lamar Jackson has turned into one of the best passers in the NFL very quickly. You spoke about him being a primarily rushing quarterback and he's improved, but he's not just improved. There was that stat that I read out last week, which was that, and I suppose the numbers have changed now, but at that time it was that he'd thrown since the start of last season 10 more touchdowns, more than anyone else through the air, that had travelled more than 10 air yards. So this is a person who, a bit deeper down the field, is supremely accurate. I think all 4 of his passing touchdowns last week were all 10 plus yards. It does help when you have DeAndre Hopkins making 2 absolutely ridiculous catches, but he's putting the ball in the right place. He's elevating the receivers around him. They, in turn, are backing him up by making some really important plays. Tez Walker coming out of nowhere last week too. I feel like it's going to be a really interesting matchup. It does hinge really on what version of Lamar we see, but from the evidence we've seen so far, he's not going to slow down.
Yeah, like the big one that sticks out in terms of passing game is the fact that they're first in the NFL with explosive play rate with 17.3. We're 28th against them with 13% given up. It's going to be a struggle. I know last week we definitely bounced back. We played a bit more zone, but even then there was some communication issues. Cough, the first Rome Redunze touchdown.
Yeah,
You
Jack
had
Campbell is just come on.
just come on, exactly. We can't let that happen this week because, okay, they don't have Isaiah Likely, who would be the kind of tight end to really exploit that. But Mark Andrews would say, he has had the drop Caesar recently, but he's a damn good tight end, even though I've benched him in fantasy. He can take advantage of it. And they do have the receivers to take advantage of the corners as well. I know there's a stat going around that Arnold's given up the most yards and coverage so far this season with nearly 200, but most of that came on explosive plays he gave up on that drive against the Packers. Like last week, he was a lot better. DJ Reed is doing his job, at least in coverage. He's not really getting targeted. He's locking down his receivers. So if he's on DeAndre Hopkins, for example, we can trust that that's going to be fine. It is going to be, can Arnold and Amik especially lock up their receivers, because Amik's going to probably see a lot of Zay Flowers when we go into nickel, because Zay will go into the slot and that's where Amik will live. But if it's 2 wide receiver stuff, it will be Arnold versus Zay Flowers. And I think Flowers is the kind of receiver that might give Arnold a bit of issues. Arnold's a very physical corner. He can deal with those big receivers, but can he handle with such a nuanced route runner like Zay Flowers? We'll have to wait and see. And then, can Derek Barnes have the impact against the pass, be it him actually playing a bit more as a pass rusher than he has the first 2 weeks, or him in coverage against Charlie Kolar or Derrick Henry or Mark Andrews? Can he lock down them? Because if we can have good days out Arnold against Flowers and then Derek Barnes have a good day, everything should be a lot easier. But we've also got to make sure the pass rush is married to that. We can't have some of the plays that happened even against Caleb last week happen where Hutch, I know obviously the player I'm going to use here is a one where Kirby got the interception, but where Hutch gets the pressure, the other side, the right-hand side, the left-hand side of our line, so the right-hand side of the offensive line, is nice and open. Caleb could scramble out. Then he makes a dumbass decision to launch it right where Kirby can get it. Lamar's not going to do that. If he is able to escape the pressure, he will make better decisions than Caleb will. So we've got to make sure that we do contain Lamar, because if he gets free, if he's able to make those plays out of structure, that's where we'll really get hurt, because we nearly did get hurt out of it last week against Caleb if he was just, a bit better of a processor on the run than he was last week. He was a bit more like his USC self. We might be in a bit more trouble. Lamar will give us trouble if he manage to escape the pressure. So it's about, can the pass rush get home, pressure him, get him the ball out quickly, and can the coverage stay sticky to some of their tougher receivers, which, is a lot to ask and also seems quite basic. But if we can do it, it will make this game very easy for us.
Yeah, the pass rush is the key. I do think if Lamar has the chance to throw it well, he's going to slowly pick us apart. I'm not sure our back seven is so much better than their receivers that they'll be able to hang for however long he has to throw. So pressure is going to be key. It's all about Aiden Hutchinson. I hate to put it on all one man's shoulders, and I do think Tyreek Williams has been very impressive actually in the first couple of weeks about getting in the passing lanes and that sort of thing. That's going to be key too. But UK Ravens put it in the chat as we've been talking here. The big weakness for the Ravens is their guards. Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Falele have both been really struggling. And actually, I think Falele struggling has made Roger Rosengarten at right tackle look worse. Where does Aiden Hutchinson line up? Over right tackle. So, go and get him, Aiden Hutchinson, off that right-hand side. Give Falele and Rosengarten a really hard day. Maybe force Mark Andrews into being a player that he doesn't want to be in terms of being someone who has to kind of chip and then release, or just being in as a blocker, which is really not his game, because Hutch is taking over. I know that against the Browns, they moved around Garrett a lot to try and go up against right guards specifically, and it worked very, very well. So I'm expecting a big day from Hutch. If we're going to win this game, that has to be a key. But on the other side, if Davenport can't go and he didn't practice today, then it looks like it's going to be Al-Qadim Mohammed being on the other side. Now, AQM has, I think, played really well in relief. Can he do the job being a starter? He did really well in relief last year, but maybe wasn't quite as good as a starter when he was asked to take more reps. So it remains to be seen. But he has been very good in terms of PFF grade, pressure rate, converting that into something that really affects the play. So, and I mean, Mohammed is better at creating pressure than Davenport is. They're a very different sort of edge rusher. So can Mohammed give problems to the other side? Because as much as, Voorhees is struggling, I also think that's creating pressure on Stanley. There was a sack given up on the left-hand side of that line against the Browns, where Stanley was expecting help from the running back and didn't get it, so had a soft edge. And the edge rusher just got there very, very quickly. So, can you get the tackles worrying about their guards inside? Can you create that pressure? This is where Derek Barnes comes into. We can't let Lamar just pass, so you have to create pressure. I do expect our blitz rate to be high, but if they pick it up well, that's just going to give Lamar a great shout against a reduced amount of defenders. So it's a bit more boom or bust, but I don't think we win this game by not trying to be boom or bust. If you go average, they'll pick us apart. We need to create a bit of luck here, and I think that's the best way to do it.
That, and also picking up our stunt rate, because we've not really done too many stunts so far on the defensive line. If you want to get AQ, one thing we did against the Packers was line up AQ inside and then have him stunt out as like a sort of tackle end stunt. Do more of those, especially if you line him and Aiden up on the same side of the line. Let's say Davenport can go, for argument's sake. Suddenly then you can use AQ in that kind of tackle end stunt role on third downs, where you get him looping and you get Hutch attacking the inside shoulders, attacking those guards. It can create pressure, even if it is then Lamar has to scramble and throw it away. That's one down contained. And then the best defense is Dan. And I'll give Ant a lot of credit because he's also said this on Monday, but Dan said his presser as well today. The best defense is just not making mistakes on offense, keeping Lamar and their offense off the field for as long as we can. And then if they do make any mistakes, capitalize them. We can't have some of the stuff that happened last week where we got 3 turnovers technically and we only got 7 points out of 21 on those. We've got to make that at least 14, 17. We can't be given up 3 chances they might give us, because we know they won't give us that sort of mercy on the other side. If Goff throws an interception, we know they're going to punish us, even if it is a long field goal, for instance. We've got to capitalize on the turnovers, and get turnovers, because that might be the only way is stalling their drives by, a random throw, another fumble by Derrick Henry. If there's a betting site out there with Brian Branch over under half fumble forced, hit the over. I can see him getting a fumble this week potentially again, especially if we do use him as that matchup against the run and in the pass. But yeah, the best defense is a good offense right now.
All right, we're coming to the end here. Time for a score prediction, my guy. What do you think?
Oh, they do score. I'm going to go 31-28 to the Ravens.
Yeah, I have the Ravens as well. I know a lot of people in the chat are trying to buck this trend and say that the Lions are going to win. I know that Anthony Fitzpatrick, who's just going to be taking the college show in about half an hour's time, has gone Lions 30, Ravens 17. How good would that feel? DM5TV has Lions 34, Ravens 31. I actually have the reverse of that score. Ravens 34, Lions 31. But we shall see. Fingers crossed. If we can nick this one, it really goes towards the Lions Super Bowl credentials. It puts the Green Bay result very much in the wing mirror, in the you know what I mean, in the distance.
The review mirror. And
that's the one.
With the gauntlet schedule coming up, I don't want to say obviously there's no easy games in NFL, but if we can get over this hurdle, the next couple of weeks don't look as hard. You've got the Browns on the 28th, which, you know, if you're over here in the UK, feel free to watch the whatever they're calling it on Channel 5 to get that for free. You've got the Bengals coming up with an injured Joe Burrow. Easier times are coming.
Fingers crossed. Right, as I say, College Football Podcast coming up in about 30 minutes' time. So if you're interested in what happened in college football last weekend and looking ahead to this coming weekend, then please do stick around on this channel because Ant and Ryan are going to be talking all about it. It was a fantastic weekend filled with plenty of high-profile upsets. So really, really recommend that you guys go and listen to that. If you're on the audio pod, I'll be editing that this evening, so it should be up on your podcast feed very shortly. Main show, don't know if a play-by-play is going to be happening on Monday night. I know that Ant mentioned that he was keen to actually do one. We shall.
I'll be free, so
we shall see.
And I might be getting, if we do have one, a special guest release the second half of that game as well, potentially.
Cool, nice tease. And then the review show. I have no idea. I haven't spoken to Ant yet and Ash about their plans while I am on vacation. You can find us on our socials, Roar of the Lions UK, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And the Facebook group for Worldwide Fans is Detroit Lions Fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. Lots of really good photos and videos from the guys who went out to see both the Green Bay and Chicago games in there, especially the guys from this side of the pond. On the website, rotluk.com, you can find Ash's preview articles for each game. Please do subscribe, rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider, give us a like, and all of that stuff. Excuse me, as I choke. I'll edit that out. Just want to thank everyone for the great support over the first month of this season. You've been absolutely fantastic. I'll be back in about a week and a half. Probably not for the Browns review because I won't have seen the game. Why am I losing my voice?
You just chokes up that you're going to be missing so much good.
I'm so sad, man. Yeah, but hopefully I'll come back and we'll have been 2-0 through the stretch and we can get on to the next bit of the schedule successfully. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Enjoy the Sunday football into Monday night. Contrapass says 2K coming as well. We are about 30 subscribers away from 2,000 on YouTube, so if you haven't subscribed already, that would be much, much appreciated. Ash, cheers for this with me, man. To everyone listening, thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Let's go Lions, One Pride.
One Pride.
Recording stopped.